My grandfather left me exactly two things when he passed away: a failing antique watch repair shop on the edge of the city, and a strict rule never to open the brass safe hidden behind the floorboards in the back room. For 3 years, I kept that promise, watching the dust pile up while I struggled just to pay the monthly rent. Then last Thursday night, a man wearing a bespoke tailored suit walked into the shop 10 minutes after closing time. He didn't look at the displays. He walked straight to the counter, set down a velvet pouch, and pulled out a heavy, intricately engraved silver pocket watch. He slid it across the glass and said, "Fix it. You have 48 hours." I picked up the watch, turning it over to check the casing. The moment my loupe hit my eye, my breath hitched. Etched into the interior gear plate was the exact same stylized mechanical crest that was welded onto the door of my grandfather's hidden safe. Before I could even ask where he got it, the man looked at his own wrist, looked back at me, and whispered, "If it stops ticking by midnight tomorrow, everyone in this city changes forever." Asterisk, the bell above the shop door chimed as the man stepped backward into the rain, vanishing into the city fog before I could demand an explanation. The shop felt instantly colder, the damp night air clinging to the old wooden rafters. I stood alone under the single buzzing overhead light, the silver pocket watch resting heavy in the palm of my hand, and like normal timepieces, it's ticking. Wasn't steady, it skipped beats, rhythmic and erratic, like a panicked heartbeat echoing through the quiet room. Every third or fourth beat felt elongated, a subtle drag against the internal springs that sent a strange, low-frequency vibration straight through my fingertips. I carried it back to my workbench, clearing away the standard quartz movements, leather straps, and magnifying lenses I usually worked on under the high-powered microscope. The internal mechanism was unlike anything taught in traditional watchmaking schools. The gears didn't look machined. They looked completely hand-carved, out of an unknown, dark alloy that seemed to absorb the light from my desk lamp rather than reflect it. Every tooth on every wheel was perfectly aligned, yet there was no balance wheel, no traditional jewels to reduce friction, and no visible escapement holding the tension. It defied standard physics, operating on a closed loop of continuous motion. That shouldn't have been possible without an external power source. The crest on the mainspring barrel was unmistakable, 3 interlocking gears surrounding a hollow eye. It was the exact insignia stamped onto the brass safe my grandfather told me to forget about. For years, I had stared at that symbol on the workshop invoices and faded stationery, assuming it was just a quirky marketing logo from a bygone era. Now, seeing it inside this impossible machine, the pieces of a much larger, darker puzzle began to slam into place, realizing the answers weren't on my workbench. I grabbed a crowbar from the utility closet. My hands shook as I knelt in the corner of the back room, prying up the old, water-damaged floorboards. They groaned under the strain, snapping backward to reveal the heavy, rusted brass safe embedded deep into the concrete foundation of the building. My grandfather had never left a combination, and the dial was completely frozen in place, seized by decades of rust and neglected oxidation. But as I held the strange silver pocket watch near the locking mechanism, something impossible happened. The internal gears of the watch suddenly spun furiously in reverse, whirring like a trapped insect. A series of loud, metallic clicks echoed through the empty shop as the tumblers inside the safe door began to slide on their own, driven by a magnetic resonance or a mechanical command I couldn't comprehend. The heavy brass door unlatched and swung open entirely on its own, scraping against a stone floor. Inside, there were no stacks of cash, no bonds, and no expensive family heirlooms. Instead, there was a leather-bound logbook filled with dates, spanning back 50 years, a detailed blueprint of the city's underground subway infrastructure, and a second, identical pocket watch, except its hands were completely frozen at exactly 11:59. Its silver casing tarnished to a deep charcoal black. I carefully lifted the logbook, its brittle pages crackling in the silence. I flipped through the entries, tracing my grandfather's precise, Looping cursive. The early pages detailed standard business transactions from the 1970s, but as the years progressed, the ledger entries dissolved into frantic, dense notes filled with complex mathematical formulas, astronomical charts, and references to glitches in the city's daily routine. He had documented trains arriving at stations minutes before they ever departed their previous stops, building shadows falling in direct opposition to the afternoon sun, and entire crowds of pedestrians stopping and resetting mid-sentence like a skipping record. I opened the logbook to the final entry, dated exactly 1 week before he died. The ink was heavy and uneven, written with a trembling hand. The temporal grid requires balance. One watch maintains the forward momentum, the other anchors the anchorless. If the traveler's watch stops, the sequence resets to the baseline. They will come to claim the variable to force a loop. Do not let the gears freeze if midnight catches. Both devices, the city unrights itself. Suddenly, the front door of the shop rattled violently, the glass pane vibrating violently against its weathered iron frame. Through the frosted window, I could see the silhouettes of 3 figures standing outside on the dark pavement. They didn't move like regular pedestrians waiting out a storm. Their postures were stiff, completely synchronized, and their shadows stretched unnaturally long across the concrete, stretching toward the building even though the street lamps were positioned directly behind them. They stood perfectly still, their forms obscuring the dim light of the alleyway. The silver watch on my workbench skipped another beat. The ticking grew noticeably slower, the intervals stretching longer and heavier, sounding like a dull hammer striking wood. Simultaneously, the ambient hum of the city outside the distant traffic on the highway, the low rumble of the subway line beneath the floorboards. The steady patter of the falling rain suddenly dropped in pitch, slowing down into a low, distorted groan that vibrated in my teeth. The world outside the shop window was losing its speed, grinding to a halt along with the gears on my desk. I looked down at the blueprints on the floor, noticing for the first time that the subway lines weren't routes at all. They were laid out in the exact, precise shape of the interlocking gears etched into the watch casing. The frozen watch inside the safe began to vibrate against the metal shelf, its minute hand twitching violently, trying to force itself over. The final crest toward midnight. My grandfather hadn't been running a simple repair shop, and the city outside wasn't operating on normal time. I was holding the only mechanical device keeping the present moment from collapsing into whatever temporal void lay waiting in the dark. The door handle began to turn slowly from the outside, the old brass lock clicking as the figures began to apply steady, relentless pressure against the frame. The glass began to spiderweb with fine cracks under the strain. I looked down at the workbench, torn between running out the back alley into a city that was rapidly freezing in place, or forcing my tweezers into the mechanism to manually drive the gears of the silver watch back into motion, knowing that whatever I chose would determine if tomorrow morning ever arrived.